if I accept someone's profession of faith, if that person claims to be a Christian, then what is my responsibility toward that individual? And if I say, oh, yes, I'm not saying those people aren't necessarily Christians. Well, okay, so if you're accepting their profession of faith, then you need to treat them like Christians. I know way too many people who have a deep separationist, fundamentalist mindset at this point. And the idea is somehow they live in the two different worlds. On the one hand, they'll say, oh, I'm not saying this person isn't a Christian. But then on the other hand, they will treat them as if they are not a Christian. And they will say, no, I will not associate with this person. I believe I will be with them forever in heaven, but not here on earth. Now, don't get me wrong. There are appropriate fellowship and ecclesiastical distinctions. In other words, it's an appropriate thing for a church to say, this is where we stand. And so I don't think it would be right for me to be an elder in a Presbyterian church. And I don't think it would be proper to have a Presbyterian as an elder in my church. But man, let me tell you something. I'm far closer to the vast majority of my conservative Presbyterian brothers than I am to any liberal in any denomination at all. They're Christians. We have fellowship in the gospel. We can have a distinction when it comes to the fellowship in the local church so that we can have specific beliefs. But this idea that many people have, they don't seem to realize what they're doing is, for example, some people will add their view of the spiritual gifts to the gospel. Someone who disagrees with them in that subject, that person needs to repent and get saved. And it's like, do you really want to add your understanding of that issue to the gospel itself? That's scary, but there's a lot of people who will do it. Instead of recognizing that there are core beliefs that cannot be violated, cannot be compromised, and then you have concurrent rings around that of things that are very important and things that do not define the faith. Basically, the fundamentalist mindset doesn't make that distinction. Everything defines the faith. So if you're different from me at all, you're lost. You're just not even a Christian. And the resultant way of treating people is that right as we were getting ready to go on air, I was noticing on Facebook an individual just going after Calvinism. And it is amazing to watch. Here is a graphic. It's in the midst of his harangue against Calvin, this murderous, horrific, mean-spirited, blah, blah, blah. And you'll notice it says, once saved, always saved. Perfect theology if you want to murder your public critics. And, of course, one of the medieval portraits of a younger Calvin there. And I've watched a few people trying to reason with him. There's no reasoning with this gentleman. I just pointed out, certain people, they don't have ears to hear. I mean, there's no rational thought going on. They've got their position, and they're not interested in any counterfact. They're not interested in any fairness. They're not interested in looking at anything in history. And have you read about when the plague struck Strasbourg, when Calvin was ministering to the French refugees, how he risked his life to minister to the people? Well, I don't care. That's irrelevant. It doesn't fit their means. So we're not even going to think about anything like that. And have you read any of his letters? Have you seen just how he had a pastoral? No, don't care. It doesn't fit my, no, I hate Reformed theology. Therefore, I hate Calvin, and I'm just not going to listen to anything. I was struck once again by the fact that there are so many people that will never even give Luther a shot. Because, well, I have differences with Luther. I disagree with Luther on baptism, or I disagree with Luther on the mode of the Lord's Supper or the meaning of the Lord's Supper, and just never have any willingness to even think about any other perspective than their very, very narrow view. And hence they'll never learn anything from another perspective. And eventually such people become extremely stunted. There doesn't seem to be any growth in depth of their own perspective, because eventually, if you won't listen to what somebody else has to say, you pretty much figure you've got it all figured out. And where do you go from there? What more is there to learn, I guess? And I see that a lot these days. It's almost like it's a knee-jerk reaction to the people that have no concept of divine revelation, have no concept of Scripture as a sure word from God. And for a lot of people, if Scripture is a sure word from God, then that means that I should never have to rethink anything. I should never have to grow. I've just got it all figured out. And I'm happy for those of you that do. The rest of us probably, need to continue to work through things because there seems to be a whole lot more there than meets the eye. But anyway, I was just noticing this gentleman's the only way to describe him is harangues against Reformed theology. And honestly, it doesn't make me angry. It makes me sad. It makes me very, very sad. A lot of what I have been pondering has been thinking about the history of how we've gotten to where we are today. I think most of us would agree that the vast majority of the interactions that we see online, for example, are anything but edifying for almost anybody involved. There are a lot of people who just simply don't even want to touch it. It's toxic. That's a fairly decent term to describe a lot of the interactions that we see on Facebook, on Twitter. Yeah, we use those things to communicate with one another. At the same time, you have to take the good with the bad. And if we were to give a grade to the level of rationality, logic, fairness, kindness, gentleness, respectfulness that goes into what happens on social media, I think it's a D- on its best day and an absolute F every other day. But one other quick thing before we wrap up. What happens that illustrates that lies have a never-ending life, no matter how badly they've been demonstrated to be lies? Yeah, it's sad that so many Christians are willing to believe whatever they read online, as long as it's negative, even if it's being written by a secular person about Christians. And so earlier today, we were sent a little clip. This is 1 minute and 2 seconds. But remember the American Thinker hit piece where, I contacted the author and said, do you normally not contact the people that you're talking about? Well, maybe I should have. Did you do any research, debates, books, anything like that? Don't need to. You're wrong. That deep level of journalistic excellence that was provided by American Thinker that then would not publish Michael Brown's article, even when he cut it down to half the length of what the original thing was. Yeah, those folks. Reverend John A. Decker, an outreach of the Cub Hill Bible Presbyterian Church. Here's what he had to say. It's only a minute long.
This is Pastor David Lewis at the Cub Hill Bible Presbyterian Church with a moment of truth. In order to be as fair and balanced as I can, I must report the facts on all sides, even when it's inconvenient and embarrassing to do so. To quote from a recent article by James Simpson from American Thinker, many evangelical Christians are becoming useful idiots for Islamism. He lists James White, a well-known conservative Christian evangelist, as partnering with Muslim Imam Dr. Yasir Qadhi to educate Americans on why Islam is the ultimate religion. This does nothing but dilute and weaken the Christian message. Many Muslim apologists, like the political left in our land, aggressively try to inflame and provoke division. Their MO is divide and conquer. Sharia law threatens to undermine our Constitution, and terrorism is an existential threat to all of us, Christians and Muslims alike. Simpson says we're facing a multi-front aggressive effort to disarm, emasculate, and delegitimize our nation. You'll get no argument from me. I'm just saddened so many ill-informed Christians are willing to help bring that about. This is Pastor David Lewis of the Moment of Truth.
Now, ill-informed. What was described in the article that this gentleman accepts as gospel truth never happened. Anyone who's watched it knows it never happened. Anyone who listened to it knows that we refuted exactly that misrepresentation. Isn't it sad that ministers will just simply accept these falsehoods and repeat them over and over again without checking for themselves? It's a sad thing to observe, but it does happen. So there you go. It continues on, and we'll continue on.